Good day, beautiful people. I recently did a live and got a very interesting response from that live. So as a result, I thought I might as well take the content I shared in that live and share it with you in this video today. And specifically what I'm going to be sharing is the 5 things that we must focus on in order to fix our freedoms. Now, there's different freedoms that people focus on in their lives. One of those freedoms that are spoken about quite a lot on my channel is financial freedom. But secondarily, there's other freedoms. There's freedom of health, there's freedom of wealth, there's freedom of relationships, there's freedoms in areas that many people desire to fix, but sometimes we just don't know how to fix. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 things you should focus on in order to fix your freedoms, but more importantly, how these same 5 things, if not focused on and if not fixed, will ultimately result in fencing your freedom out from your life. Now let's just jump straight into it. And if at any point throughout this video you get value, or you feel as though the things I'm sharing in this video are important to you and you'd like me to do a deep dive on each of these 5 in 5 additional separate videos, then let me know in the comments below and I'll be glad to do that. And if you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Samuel Akinwin Kimwin. I help people create consistent and then colossal cash flow using resources and revenues that are always hidden right in front of us, hidden in plain sight. So there are people out there, gurus, teachers out there who tell you they'll help you become financially free in 5 to 10 years. Me and my team literally help people to achieve that in 3 to 6 months. And we have so many receipts of students and clients we've helped to do that. So with that being said, let's jump into the 5 of these focuses to fix. The first one is our mindset. Now, mindset is a super crucial element in life. It's actually the set of the sail. Jim Rohn, he used to say that our philosophy is the set of the sail. Philosophy is another word that we can literally synonymize with the word mindset. The way you think about things is determining how things are happening to you, not because the way you think about it is accurate or inaccurate, but actually just because our perception becomes our reality. So if you think people did something for you out of a negative mindset, then you're going to operate as though things have been done to you out of a negative mindset. If you think people are doing something to you because all things work together for good for them who are so forth, so forth. And for those of you who don't know, that's a verse from the Bible in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. But if that's how you think, if that's your mindset, then guess what's going to happen? No matter what happens to you, you're going to assume it was a good thing that happened to you. And even as I say that, I'm reminded of Nelson Mandela, a person who I speak about quite a lot in some of my videos, who experienced decades of prison or imprisonment of prison time, but yet came out to become someone who was extremely prime in his culture, in his community, all because of how he saw things. So mindset is the first thing we need to focus on. And there's 3 different layers that we should develop in our mindsets in order to literally ensure that our mindset, the set of the sail, is set appropriately. Now, one of the things I don't want to do is deep dive on each of these things in this video, because if I deep dive on each of these things in this video, then the video would just be extremely long. But more importantly, not only would this video be completely wrong, not only would this video be completely long, that's what happens when you used to think and now you just talk about it, thinking faster than I can speak. Not only will this video end up being completely long, but also when you guys ask me, or if you ask me to deep dive on these topics in later videos, there'll be nothing to deep dive on because we would have done it all now. So if you desire for me to deep dive on mindset, just let me know. But mindset is the set of the sail, and it's how you perceive things that are going to basically have an impact. And for those of you who are interested in finding out a bit more about perception, go watch the video I recorded 2 days ago. That'll be super helpful for you as it talks about perception. Now, after mindset, the next thing we have to trigger is marketing. Now, marketing is a very interesting thing because it's a word we've all heard, but very few of us understand what marketing really is. Now, just in a very simple nutshell, I would tell you that marketing is telling everybody what you do. And I've also got, I guess, a simple question for you. And that question is, how did Donald Trump become the president of the United States? Now, at the time of this recording, Donald Trump is currently serving his 2nd term in office as the president of the United States. And that's not an accident. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not an accident. And the reason I can tell you it's not an accident is because of this second focus that all of us should have in order to express or expand our freedoms. And that second focus is marketing. Failure to market is literally one of the first reasons why most people don't have a level of freedom that they actually truly desire or require. So the first thing is mindset, focus on your mindset. The second thing is marketing, focus on how you do your marketing. Now, The third thing is a process called managing. Now, when I use the term managing, I'm talking about the management of relationships. Why? Because if you effectively start marketing in any way, shape, or form, telling people what you do, what happens is people then begin to reach out to you. And when those people reach out to you, like, what are you going to do? You're going to have to manage that relationship. Now, you can manage a relationship positively, you can manage a relationship negatively, but nonetheless, you are engaging in the management of a relationship. And managing of relationships becomes crucial, vital. It literally becomes a mandatory component the minute you start doing any form of marketing. And most people think, okay, Samuel, before I do any specific kind of marketing, okay, so do I have to turn the marketing tap on? Well, the answer is no, because everybody's marketing whether they like it or not. Okay, this is a lesson that most people aren't aware of. Most people don't realize that they're marketing on a daily basis by literally choosing to be who they are. And some people might argue and put their hand up and say, hey, but Samuel, I didn't choose to be like this. This is just how I am. Okay, but you deciding not to change who you are or how you are by developing your mindset, which was the third thing, is basically going to affect your marketing. And if your mindset doesn't steer your marketing, then your marketing obviously will be sporadic in your ability to start managing. And this is where most people go wrong, because most people don't start on the foundation, which is the mindset. So they don't have the right mindset, and they start doing basically ambiguous marketing. They're marketing out of a place of ignorance rather than out of a place of intelligence. So then their marketing results in them obviously being contacted or connected with through means of people communicating, and then they go into doing hazmatic managing because they haven't been purposeful in their marketing or purposeful in their mindset. So we start with mindset, we shift into marketing, we then move into managing. And what are you managing effectively? You're managing relationships, you're managing communication, you're managing engagement, you're managing people that are communicating with you based off of your marketing, okay? And then after managing, we go to what I think is probably the most interesting out of these 5 focuses. And the most interesting for me out of these 5 focusing is what comes after are managing, and that is measuring. Now, the reason I probably think that's interesting is because I used to teach mathematics. I'm literally super interested in mathematics. You might even say I have an infatuation with mathematics. I see mathematics and the ability to measure as one of the most valuable things, components that we as human beings actually have, all right? One of the things I shared in the live that I did prior to this was the fact that mathematics is one of the only, if not the only subject in school that was not made up. No human being made up maths. No human being really even made up any element of maths. All maths, which is true core maths, is discovered. And the reason why that's powerful is because we speak the English language, but guess what? The English language was not discovered. The English language was created, okay? I remember learning French in school. I'm laughing because I got an F in French, but I remember learning French in school, but guess what? None of the French language was discovered. The whole of the French language was created, okay? Now, you know, there's extensive studies showing that all modern day languages are derivatives of a more premium historic language, okay? But this video isn't for that today. But nonetheless, all of the modern day languages come from somewhere else, which means they are derived or they are created. None of them were literally discovered. Now, the reason that's so important is because maths is different. Like, the subject of maths is not something that any one person created. The subject of maths is something that is discovered, which tells us something which is super secret. It tells us that maths was here before any of us showed up. And the reason why this is super powerful is because it's a language in and of itself. It's a language that, as we discover it, and I know, you know, there's people that are going to say, oh, but Samuel, I'm not good at maths. Oh, but Samuel, you know, I had bad math teachers, or Samuel, I had the greatest maths teachers, but I still couldn't get it. The reason why many people, especially if you're like me and you were schooled in the UK, do not get maths very well is because there is a deliberate, I believe anyway, having been a math teacher and a teacher trainer for a number of years, there is a deliberate embedded curriculum within the curriculum of maths education in the UK to turn people away, all right, to make people not understand the subject, to make people become misguided by the subject and so forth. But again, if I go into that in this video, this will be a whole political video rather than a development and growth video. So we start with the process of our mindset. We move into the process of our marketing. We then develop the process of our managing, and then we get to my favorite process, which is the measuring. Measuring is our ability to assess value in circumstances, situations, and scenarios. I'll say that again in case you need to pick up your pen. Measuring is our ability to assess value in any situation, scenario, or setting that we may find ourselves in. So the reason why measuring is so valuable is because measuring is literally what we have to do every single day in our life without us or with us knowing. Now, those who know that they must be measuring on a regular basis, guess what? They're the best at measuring because they end up recognizing what value is and investing in value, and as a direct byproduct, receiving the result of investing in value. Now, what most people do, and this is definitely most people don't realize that they need to engage in their skill set of measuring on a regular basis. So as a result, what happens is they're not measuring anything, they're not identifying value anywhere, and as a result, they end up with the byproduct, the result of the lack of measuring, which is literally getting the result of not measuring, which is nothing, getting leftovers, getting scraps, proverbially, financially, or in business, or in relationships, and so forth and so forth. Now, measuring is crucial. Measuring is what I had to do in 2015 when I was sat at a desk in the classroom that I used to have, in the job that I used to have, and I was staring at a screen. And whilst I was sat there staring at the screen, slightly perplexed, it started to dawn on me, like, I work this job, I wake up so early. At the time I was waking up at like 5:36 a.m. in the morning. I was rushing to work to get to work for like 7:30 a.m. every morning. And I was sitting, just at that time, I was sitting at the desk looking at the screen, and the thought that came to me is like, how is this all funded? Like, where does the money come from, kind of thing, right? How does this work? That was kind of the core of the question. How does this work? And I was thinking about at the time, how does it work in terms of the school system? How does it all work? How can this whole machine stand? How is it still so well oiled, right? And I started to think about the fact that there were at the time over 400 schools inside of these 33 boroughs of London. And I was working obviously in one of these schools, and I was thinking to myself, like, how do they fund all of this? Because all of these schools are well resourced, all of these schools have funds, all of these schools pay teachers. Like, how do they fund all this? And then the answer kind of hit me. The answer was, well, the government pay, right? The government pay for all of these things. And this was at the time the academies were starting to creep in, so the government was still paying for the majority of schools at the time. I don't know if the situation's changed now. So in my head, I started measuring. Okay, this is the art of measuring, right? Just looking at situations that don't look standard and figuring things out, or looking at situations that do look standard and figuring things out, right? Measuring is the art of recognizing value within any circumstance, situation, or scenario. So I'm in this circumstance, situation, and scenario in 2015. I'm working in this school full time, overtime, undertime, and even when I don't have time. And as I'm working in this school, giving them all of my energy, all of my efforts, I'm trying to figure out like what's really going on. So I say to myself, like, how do they fund this thing? How does this machine work? And I started to realize, hold on a minute, all of these schools are funded by the government. Then I asked myself, well, how does the government generate revenue? How does the government make money? And one of the things I'm, often saying to my coaching clients is, in life, there are makers and there are takers, right? And what I discovered very quickly is that the government is not a maker. The government doesn't produce value in terms of products or services. The government is a taker. It takes and extrapolates value or resources, more than value, but extrapolates resources from makers, okay? And it does that in the form of taxes. So I'm sat at my desk, I'm looking at the screen, and I say to myself, how do they pay for this stuff? And I start to realize, hold on a minute, they pay for all this stuff by taking taxes from people. And then a real question came to me, and it was like, who pays the most taxes? Simple question, but it wasn't that simple to me at the time, because at the time I was working full time, overtime, undertime, and when I didn't have time. So for me, it was kind of like a weird question to think, but I had to follow the trail to figure out the question, and I did. And this is what I came to the conclusion. I came to the conclusion that if a business owner generates £70,000, let's say in a year, and an employee generates £70,000, let's say in a year, the question I had implicitly was, who makes more money? And for most of us, we'd be like, well, they both made the same amount of money, but that's not actually true. The truth is, and what I thought through on that day, is that the employee makes a lot less money, and there's several reasons why. One of the main reasons why is because the employee doesn't even get to touch the 70,000, right? You see, we sign up to salaries of 70,000, 80,000, 100,000, and we never ever see 70,000, right? We sign up to salaries, but as employees, we are taxed before we even get the money. So really, you're not on a salary of 70,000, you're on a salary of 35,000 or 38,000 or 42,000, whatever you end up with, even though you signed up for a £70,000 salary. So that's the first thing, which is super interesting, because you're taxed before you even get the money, okay? Now, let's move off of the employee and go on to the business owner to really start to get to the understanding of how a business owner makes a whole lot more money than the employee, even though they both build or generated 70,000 that year. Okay, so from the business owner's perspective, a few things happen. The first thing is this, and again, we can go into this a lot deeper. If you want me to do a deep dive on the measuring component alone, let me know in the comments below. So with an entrepreneur or a business owner, one of the things that an entrepreneur or business owner is supposed to do is specialize in the thing that they offer, whether it's a product or a service. And what happens a lot of the time, the Bible gives us this cheat code. The Bible has a verse, it says humility comes before honor. So what happens for many people who are business owners successfully or entrepreneurs successfully is because they get laser focused on the thing they offer or serve, they very quickly realize, especially if they're really good, because I'm so good at this, I recognize that I'm really no good at any other thing, right? And this is one of the things that happens to the human mind. The better we get at something, the more we realize our limitations in that thing, and often as a result in other things. So what happens is, let's say a business owner is a swimming instructor and she teaches people how to swim. So her main focus is going to be the art of swimming, how to get people to swim better, the teaching elements, the pedagogy elements. Pedagogy is just a long word in teaching. It just means the way in which you convey information. All right, that's a simple definition. So the swimming instructor is going to be so laser focused on that she's very quickly going to realize when she gets her first letter from HMRC, hey, I have no idea about accounting. Or when she gets her first letters from Companies House, hey, I know nothing about the legal aspects. Or when she gets her first letter from whoever else, her client, saying, hold on a minute, you haven't billed me yet, she's going to realize, oh, I don't know anything about administration, right? So what's this swimming instructor going to do? Well, in most cases, if she's thinking like a business owner, an entrepreneur, and not thinking like an employee, what she's going to do is she's going to hire people, whether in-house or out-house. She's going to hire an accountant, she's going to hire a lawyer, she's going to hire a administrator. Now, here's where this gets very deep. The administrator, the lawyer, and the accountant are 9 times out of 10 going to be way better at accounting, administration, and law than the business owner is. So what that means is that business owner, swimming instructor, is going to probably pay that lawyer £2,000, $2,000, €2,000, but she is going to get way more than £2,000, euro, or dollars of value from that lawyer. Why? Because that lawyer is extremely way more smarter than the business owner in the field of accounting. Okay, it doesn't mean they're a smarter person, but it just means they are more invested in that field than they are in the swimming. So as a result, what happens is let's take the accountant, for example. The accountant might say to the swimming instructor, hey, did you know that if you buy a car for your business, okay, rather than buy a car for yourself, that is actually a business expense. And because it's a business expense, you can use pre-tax money, pre-tax dollars, pre-tax pounds, pre-tax euros to buy that car, and as a result you are paying for the car out of your 70,000 instead of paying for the car out of your 42,000, which is your after-tax money. Now, if we take the employee again, the employee never sees the 70,000, so the employee can only buy the same £20,000 car with their after-tax money. So the employee apparently makes 70,000, only ever sees, let's say, 42,000, and then has to pay for a £20,000 car out of the 42,000. Whereas the business owner discovers by paying 2,000 to a accountant that they can pay for their £20,000 car out of their 70,000, and now they've got 50,000 to figure out how they pay tax on that, right? So as a quick example, in this example we've just given, the employee has paid tax on 70,000 and then had to still go and buy their car or whatever else they need to buy. Whereas the business owner has only had to pay tax on the 50,000 in this simple example and still get to £20,000 car. And they're basically having to mathematically pay less tax because they're paying tax on a lesser amount. Okay. Now, why is this important? This is important because this is what I was figuring out as I sat at this desk, measuring my life, measuring situations, measuring scenarios, and measuring settings, and saying to myself, where does the money come from? So what I realized very simply is that for me at that time, I realized that the government fund all of these schools, but the government fund all of these schools with taxpayers' money. And then the last part of this was who pays the most taxes. And my answer was not the people that make the most money. My answer was not what most people think is the people who are having businesses and entrepreneurs. No, what my answer was is the highest paid employees are the people paying the most money. Okay, I'm going to say that again in case you need to pick up your pen. The highest paid employees are the people paying the most money to the government. And it's not because it's a scam or no. It's because the highest paid employees don't have the benefit of realizing quickly by nature of their work that they are not as good at accounts as they are at brain surgery, or they are not as good at accounts as they are at all of these other things that they do, architecture, etc., right? But business owners who may not make even as much as these high paid employees realize that by virtue of the fact that they want to get specialized or focused on the one thing they sell or the one product that they use to serve. Okay, so when you realize that, you realize the Bible principle is actually the key right there. Humility comes before honor. So because they humble themselves and realize, okay, I'm not an all-star accountant, I'm not an all-star solicitor, I'm not an all-star administrator, what they do is they find people who are all-stars, and those all-stars bring value beyond the value that that business owner could have found or discovered themselves. And that makes those players valuable to the person, but it also makes the business owner more valuable unto themselves as well. So that's measuring, okay? And you don't have to always measure deep, complex ideologies like that, but that simple breakdown that I had in 2015 when I was working as a full-time employee helped me realize that business owners who make 70,000 are much more better off than employees that make 70,000 just because of those kind of metrics. And then it started to make me realize that the government is actually incentivized to have people becoming high-paid employees way more than they're incentivized to having any kind of paid business owners. And then it started to really make it clear to me why the curriculum that I was teaching in schools, the curriculum I was given by the government or by, you know, the school leadership, etc., was the curriculum it was. It was a curriculum that was created and crafted in order to convey that we should all work a specific way. All right. And I'll just leave that at that. So we start with mindset. A super focus that if we fix, we can start to portray or re-engage our freedom. We then move on to marketing, and from marketing we move on to managing, and from managing we move on to measuring. Okay, and I've kind of invested quite a bit of time in measuring because most people don't realize how powerful it is when you measure your situation, you measure your circumstance, you measure your setting in order to see where true value is, because that can literally determine your whole life. Now, the last of the 5 is maturing. It's how we basically go from a place where we've measured a scenario, situation, or setting, and we make a change in order to mature into the value or the freedom that we actually desire. So I had to make a decision on that day in 2015, and I made a decision. I made the decision to hand in my resignation. I made a different decision a few months before that, which was to go down from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. Okay, so I could regain 1 day of the week and invest that into my property investment business. Okay, and in life, this is what happens a lot of the time. A lot of the time, when we do accurate measuring, we then move on to more valuable maturing. So in this video, this is really what I wanted to share with you. I wanted to share with you that there are 5 things, if you truly divinely focus on, they will be the keys to unlock your freedom. However, I have to give you this warning. If you do not focus on these 5 things, what will happen is these very same 5 things will become the fences that lock out your freedom. They'll become the very fences that do not allow freedom to engage with you, that do not allow freedom to touch you, that do not allow freedom to permeate you. So with that being said, this is Something I Can Win. I'm signing out. Please remember, as I always say, small keys open big doors. Good day, God bless. Maybe go and watch one of my other videos to help you move further, faster in your future. And I look forward to seeing you on another video in the future. Let's go.